Morning friends, another day working on the FLT here. We're going to go ahead and try to get this thing stripped out as far as possible. We're going to start with the gas tank today. I did get the keys in the mail, so I'm super excited about that. I was able to get the gas door open, obviously work the ignition switch, get the saddlebag unlatched and off. I did take that stuff apart off camera. The saddlebags are super easy to remove. Obviously there's a battery box here that had a cover on it, and then there's of course oil, in the oil bag and whatnot. And I'm going to remove the oil lines from the bottom of the bike here in an effort to try to get the oil to drain into this pan that I have below. Hopefully that works out real well. So we're going to start there actually. We're going to pull these oil lines, try to drain the oil from the oil bag into the pan, and then we'll work on the tank and again try to work from the top down on this bike and get this thing completely stripped down. The goal is to have this bike completely broken down this week. So I'm going to put in as much time as I can today and tomorrow or the next day, however long it takes to get this bike broken down so I can get this thing off the lift and disassembled as much as possible. So let's get started. We're going to start by taking off these bottom oil lines from the oil pump. I'm hoping that I can drain the oil this way rather than pulling the bottom of the oil bag. The oil bag does have a drain on it, and I can drain it that way too, and that might be a good route. It just makes a giant mess. Unfortunately, with the exhaust in the way, there's no good way to get to these clamps to get the oil lines off. Everything's kind of routed funny. Thankfully, with a 1/4-inch wrench, I'm able to get to these clamps and get them undone. Every good Harley needs tons of zip ties everywhere. And I know it does clean things up. This one's got quite a few on these lines here. So I'm going to go ahead and nip these out of the way so I can maneuver these lines around. Of course, these lines are about as stiff as can be, and they don't want to come off, so they're going to fight the entire way. course, there's also oil on these lines, so they are slippery. And sometimes with these petrified lines, there's just no way to get them to come off of the little ends, the barbs. So I'm going to cut it. That way I can pull the old hard crusty line off. I don't have any plans to reuse these lines because they are in not good shape. So cutting them is not going to do anything. It's not going to hurt anything. There we go. Now with the oil bag draining, we're going to go ahead and work on getting this tank unmounted from the frame here. So there are 2 1/2-inch bolts on the front, and I believe there are 1 or 2 bolts on the back here. I haven't taken those off yet, so I'm going to take this plate off first. There's a plastic plate that the seat goes over right in the middle here, and that just unscrews. So we'll pull those screws real quick here, take a look under that plate, and see how this thing is fixed to the frame. There are 2 more screws right on each side here, so I'll go ahead and get those removed in a second here. I'm going to put these screws actually back in the frame for now. Of course, there is a crossover line for each side of the tanks, or each side of the tank on the bottom here. So I'm going to undo that as well real quick. And again, that line is also pretty petrified, so I'm just going to cut it. I did take a look inside the gas tank, and it's actually super clean. I was really surprised at how nice the tank was on the inside. With that out of the way, I'm going to unbolt the front 2 bolts here. Like I said, it's a 1/2 inch. There's a locking bolt on the other side here, so I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to step around here and get hopefully get the top locking bolt off first. I'm sure all this is going to turn. There's a cat nut on this side. With that out of the way, I should be able to remove this other nut and this bolt. Alright, now that I have that front mount assembly all apart, I will put the hardware back together here and set that aside. And I know there's wiring here for the fuel sending unit, and I may have to figure out where that plugs in at, so I think I'm going to pull this center console real fast just to take a look under there. The center console has 3 screws, 1 on the back and 2 on each side here. Should be able to unscrew these and then pull that console. There's actually a nut on the back side of this screw. It's a 3/8 nut. With that out of the way, we'll pull these top 2 screws here. This Michigan weather is kicking my butt, getting a sore throat and getting a little gravelly, and unfortunately I feel like I'm coming down with a cold. With the center console out of the way, we'll go ahead and unscrew the wiring for the fuel gauge. That tank, I believe, is ready for removal. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put the center console back onto the tank because I want that to stay together. With those back in place, I should be able to just pull the tank. We'll get this fuel line out of the way, this crossover line. One thing I forgot to remove was the fuel line from the petcock, so I'll go ahead and get on the other side and get that done. And there's one fuel tank removed. With the fuel tank off, it really changed the look of the bike. You can really see how this bike is constructed frame-wise. And it's a whole different animal compared to the older Shovelheads. Obviously they went to the square frame here as opposed to the tube-style frame. And this really changed Harley Davidson's whole frame design from, I believe, 80. I'm pretty sure they did this design from 80 to 93 with the oil bag on the side. 94 it went to the center battery and all that good stuff. Pretty sure that's when it changed over. Haven't messed with a whole lot of those, so my timing's probably a little fuzzy on those dates. But anyway, from here what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and remove the brake and clutch controls, just because I need those things out of the way too. So again, working from the top down. These are always fun because the screws on these bikes have always been messed with and they're never in good shape. And they always fight you the whole way. Thankfully, the bottom two were honestly pretty loose, so it's nice to be able to pull those. I think while I've got it here, I'm actually going to undo this brake line. So that way it's supported and I should be able to get a good amount of leverage on this to unscrew it. Now with the brake line out of the way, we'll go ahead and we'll get the rest of this control removed. There's one brake master cylinder removed. For the time being, I'm actually going to take the screws, I'm going to place them into the brake master cylinder just to hang on to them. I know they're not in awesome shape. Obviously the heads are all pretty worn on these. They've been into a few times. I'm not sure if you can see them in the camera there maybe. They're not in the best shape. They could be used again. Eventually they're going to be a problem for somebody. I typically like to replace these. I do love the Allen head screws much more than these because the Allen head screws typically last a little longer. But I am going to put these back into that brake master just to hang on to them. Until I'm able to pull this front nacelle, I'm going to leave the wiring kind of dangling here. Obviously I do have my cables wrapped around. The cables are unfortunately stuck in the ties holding the bike up. Wasn't my best idea to put it that way. Probably should have thought that through a little better. But anyway, I know I need to remove this nacelle before I can actually go through and pull the cables. And I know I'm going to have to pull the bars and all that good stuff. So for right now, I'm just going to leave them how they are. And I'm going to go on the other side. I'm going to pull the clutch side controls. Same thing with this side. These screws are in rough shape. But we were able to get them out without a whole lot of issue. With that, we've got the clutch perch removed. Obviously the switch housing is still in place and the clutch cable is now dangling. The oil is still working on draining. It's almost completely empty at this point. What I'm going to do from here is I'm going to actually move down on the motorcycle. I'm going to leave the bars attached for now and the front end the way it is and probably work on that last. So I'm going to start working my way backward on the bike. I think I'm going to start with the exhaust. I'd like to get that removed soon, and then we'll see where we can go from there. I think the next step is going to be probably rear peg, get the saddlebag guards off, try to work on the back end of the bike and see where we can go from there. The hope is to keep it on its wheels as long as possible. Eventually I'm going to put the jack underneath it and take the wheels off. But for now we're going to work on just this exhaust, trying to get this out of the way. I'm going to have to get these shields off first because they do pose an issue, because I won't be able to get my Allen head into the exhaust stud. So I'm going to go ahead and work on getting this shield out of the way, and then we'll check the other side and see what that needs to move to. Hopefully I'll be able to get in here enough. I may have to find a socket wrench. Or a ratcheting wrench. I could pull the air cleaner and give myself a little bit more room, but I really don't want to take it off again. I know that one screw is in really rough shape, and I worry about damaging it. Of course, as always, if you think long enough about a problem, a solution will arise. And I do have these sockets that have screwdriver tips on them, and I believe I can get into both places with the socket wrench to be able to loosen these. If I can get these shields out of the way, it'll make all the difference in the world. I'd like to get them to the point of being able to turn them by hand, and I'm close. At this point, we'll just use the socket itself to loosen these. What I want to do is I want to get these clamps completely open so I can pull this shroud right off. Because once that's out of the way, then I can get right to this stud here. As luck would have it, when you drop a tool, it always ends up in the oil bath, right? So unfortunately, I dropped my socket and it went right into the oil. So now we're going to do a little fishing. Thankfully for a magnet, I don't have to reach my hand right down in the oil. Get this cleaned up here. Be back in business. That one's completely off, so we'll work on this one right here, and once I get this done, we'll go ahead and re-yank that shroud. and with that shroud out of the way, I will be able to get to this exhaust stud now. I know there's a stud here, and then it has a bolt in the front there, which I think I can access. And then there should be a hanger on the transmission mount here, and then of course the exhaust hooks together at this junction back here, and then I'll have to remove the exhaust from the lower bag mount as well. But we'll start up here, we'll get this one loosened, and then we'll work our way down and see about pulling this pipe today. I know this floorboard's going to be right in the way, so I'm going to have to remove this as well. The brake line is not in the way, thankfully, so I don't have to remove that yet. I need to get myself away from the pipe a little bit, so I just need a little extension to be able to get in there properly to be able to loosen this front pipe, or the rear pipe, excuse me. Alright, I have that all the way out. I'm going to work on taking this floorboard off next, because once that's out of the way, then I'll be able to unbolt the front bolt here, unbolt the transmission bolt there that holds the pipe, and then I should be able to, I don't know if I have to remove this shroud or not. I might have to. If not, then I'll work on the back side. We'll see. We'll see as we go. With the bike in the air, I got a little more leverage to work on things. I can see a little better, so I'm going to attempt to get these floorboards off now. Got the rear mount undone. We're going to work on the front one now. All right, with the floorboard out of the way, I'm going to go ahead and get this bottom mount out of the way too. Once that's out of the way, then the exhaust should be easily accessible. There's two things in this life that I always have problems with: batteries and tires. For whatever reason, they find me and I have an issue with them. So this past weekend, I had purchased new batteries for the GoPro, and I've got them now. And for whatever reason, the new batteries already don't work. The camera got down to 40% and literally shut off. I plugged the battery in and it shows the percentages at 40, but it will not power the camera without being plugged in. Cool, well, let's try the second battery, because I bought two batteries. Second battery doesn't even fit the camera. That's just my luck. Anyway, so the camera died, we replaced the batteries, and now we're back to it. Let's remove this lower bracket. We'll get this lower floorboard mount off in an effort to get this exhaust removed. With the floorboard removed, I'm going to move to the back of the bike. And from the back of the bike, I'm going to remove the rear exhaust. Try to take that off first while everything is hooked up. I should be able to pull that straight out. Once that's out, then I will be able to remove this head pipe. I know it's hooked here and at the transmission, so I know I'll have to unbolt those two parts. But first, we're going to move to the back and try to get that unbolted. So this exhaust hooks up in a couple spots here in the back. And one, there's a clamp right here. So we're going to go ahead and loosen this clamp up first and then try to get these studs out of place. Hopefully that will loosen enough to be able to pull the pipe off. So we're going to try that real quick and see if we can get that undone. We've got these two bolts here. I believe they're both 1/2 inch. We'll try to get those loosened, and then of course we'll loosen this clamp next. One of the things I didn't realize on this bike is that this exhaust is actually stock. I had no idea. I thought this was an aftermarket unit. I don't have a lot of experience with these bikes. I had an 82 FLT that had the fairing and all that good stuff, and it did have the same style exhaust, but it had aftermarket mufflers. And I had really thought that that was all an aftermarket unit as well. But come to find out, these are actually factory. Kind of a neat system, in my opinion. It's a true dual system. And this is the rear exhaust on the right-hand side, and the front exhaust runs out the left-hand side. Again, I think that's kind of cool. In an effort to speed things up, we're going to use power. Now I should be able to pull these two bolts out, and this exhaust should drop down and out of the way. A pretty unique band. Again, I didn't realize that these were a stock thing, and that's, to me, fascinating. Now I should be able to pull this muffler off. And with the muffler off, now I can go back to the front of the bike and remove that head pipe. At the front of the bike, there is a bolt here, and then right off the transmission, there's another bolt which holds this head pipe in place. So we're going to work on this transmission bolt first to try to get that out of the way. I think I can get to it underneath here with a socket. Should have just enough room to squeak in there. And I know this is a band that goes all the way through this mount, so I do have to go ahead and get this complete stud out of here. Now with that stud out of the way, I should be able to get to this nut here, and I should be able to ratchet that off. My hope is the nut on the back side of this does not free spin, and it may. I'm not sure if this is gonna fight me or not. And of course it is. So from there, we'll go ahead and remove these two bolts from the bike. Kind of a wild design here. It's actually threaded right into the engine case. And I'm not sure if you have to just put that bracket in or if this would leak at that point or how that's actually set up, because again, I've never ran into this. From what I've gathered, this is stock and that just seems odd to me, but I guess I've never messed with an FLT and taken it apart this far. So I'm learning something new today. With that out of the way, this pipe should be ready to remove as far as I'm aware. The only thing it's going to hang up on is this bracket right here that's on the transmission. Of course, with oil on everything, it makes it difficult to get a good handle on that feels comfortable enough to pull on. You don't want to slide off this thing. And something else I didn't realize is the breather is actually welded right to this. So there's a breather tube that's actually hooked right to this that I'm going to have to remove as well. Again, all new things that I have never ran into before, things I haven't encountered. We'll get these hose clamps backed off and make them move. Get the rubber piping out of the way. There's one there and there's another one here. Now, there's not enough room to get in there, unfortunately, on that side with a screwdriver, so we'll go ahead and get in here with the open end wrench. Of course, it's going to be a quarter turn at a time. I believe those are backed off far enough to be able to push the rubber hoses off, if they'll come off. They're like the rest of these hoses, they're petrified. Sometimes a pry bar and a little bit of brute force goes a long way. Unfortunately, there was no good way to take this exhaust off without prying this bracket open wider to fit it over the mount here. There's no way to get an Allen in there and move it. Unfortunately, it's way too tight. I had no options to do that other than to stick a pry bar on this and pry this sucker open. As you can see, there's a tube here that's hooked right to the exhaust, and that's, I think, a crankcase vent tube. It's nothing I've ever run into before. Kind of a neat design. Again, here's that front bracket. That bracket actually mounts right into the front of the engine case, and I'll show you that in a second here. Again, something I've never seen before. I didn't know this was something that they did, but I have not worked on a whole lot of FLTs, so I'm learning a lot today. As you can see on the front of the engine case there's actually 2 bolt holes. Again, that's where that exhaust mounts. Never seen such a thing before.